the stolen words reclaiming my voice from a manipulative loaf. I never expected to find love on a Thursday. Thursdays always felt like an in-between day. Neither the excitement of Friday nor the burden of Monday, just a soft lull in the week. I had just come out of a 3-year relationship that had dissolved like sugar in black coffee, slowly and without much notice, until the taste was just bitterness. My heart was in no shape to love again, and yet, like most foolish beginnings, it happened when I wasn't looking for it. There was nothing spectacular about the first encounter. It was a routine meeting at a friend's birthday gathering, someone else's celebration, meant to be nothing more than a polite evening of small talk, cheap wine, and group photos no one would care to print. And yet, amidst the dim lighting and loud laughter, my eyes found him. There was something magnetic in the way he observed the room, detached yet entirely present. Not the kind of presence that screamed for attention, but the sort that lingered even when he wasn't speaking. That night, we didn't talk much. Just a few words exchanged over the snacks table about the absurdity of beetroot hummus and how no one actually liked quinoa. I laughed, genuinely. It felt like my lungs had forgotten how to exhale joy and suddenly remembered. He introduced himself as Luca, no last name, no grand reveal. Just Luca. The kind of name you whisper when you're not sure if saying it louder would scare it away. Over the following weeks, our paths kept crossing. Coincidence, I thought at first, but coincidences stopped feeling accidental when he began showing up at places I mentioned in passing. A photography exhibit I planned to attend, a late-night poetry reading at a bookstore only locals knew about, even the farmer's market on Sunday mornings, when I craved silence more than strawberries. Each encounter felt natural, unforced. We were like 2 pages in a book finally dog-eared to meet. Conversation with him was different. There were no pretenses, no performative flirtation, just an ease that disarmed me. He was curious about the small things, what books I returned to when life got too loud, whether I liked the smell of rain more than the rain itself, and if I believed people truly changed or just wore different masks. It was intoxicating, that kind of attention. I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told anyone, not even my ex. And I wasn't afraid. That should have been my first warning. When Luca kissed me for the first time, it wasn't under fireworks or in the rain or any of those cliches that movies recycle. It was quiet in my apartment as we sat on the floor surrounded by vinyl records and half-eaten takeout. The moment didn't ask for permission, it just unfolded. His lips were soft, certain, and in that moment, something cracked open inside me, something I had buried deep after the last heartbreak. I didn't sleep that night, not because of nerves or excitement, but because I felt too full, like something had been poured into me. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of something I couldn't name. We began seeing each other more intentionally after that. No more accidental meetings. Now it was Luca waiting outside my building with coffee, Luca sending late-night messages that made me laugh until my ribs ached. Luca learning the rhythm of my days until he fit into them like punctuation. Never the sentence, but always the pause I didn't know I needed. But relationships built on silence always carry their own kind of noise. I started noticing things that didn't add up. Luca never spoke about his past. He brushed off questions about his family, his work, even his apartment. He was always at my place, always present, but only in ways that didn't require his full history. I rationalized it. Some people just took longer to open up. I told myself to be patient, to not rush the unraveling. But part of me was already unraveling. My friends noticed, too. At brunches and casual meetups, they'd ask questions that sounded like concern, but were really seeds of doubt. What does Luca do again? How come you've never been to his place? He's great, but doesn't he seem too perfect? I dismissed them all, defending him with a conviction that surprised even me. Love makes you blind, they say. But it's not blindness. It's selective vision. You see only what you choose to, and in the cracks, you paint over what you don't want to confront. One night, I finally asked, We were lying on my bed, the city lights bleeding through the curtains, casting soft gold onto the walls. I asked him why he never brought me to his place. There was a beat of silence, then another. Luca stared at the ceiling for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. Then he turned, kissed my forehead and said, "It's complicated. I didn't push. I regret that now." A few days later he disappeared. No calls, no texts, no cryptic messages or poetic excuses, just absence, like he had evaporated. I waited, oscillating between anger and worry. I checked hospitals, called mutual friends, even drove past places we'd visited together, half expecting him to be there, smiling like nothing had happened. But Luca was gone, and so was the version of me that believed people always stayed. I sank. There's no elegant way to describe it. I stopped going out, stopped answering texts. I called in sick to work more times than I could count. The coffee he used to bring became bitter in my mouth. Music felt intrusive. Silence became both comfort and torture. I tried deleting his pictures, but found myself staring at them instead. It was like mourning someone who hadn't died, a grief without a grave. Then, weeks later, he returned. As suddenly as he vanished, he showed up at my door with rain in his hair and a bouquet of lavender in his hands. I wanted to slam the door in his face. I wanted to scream. But instead, I let him in. He said he'd made a mistake, that he had to go back to fix something before he could move forward. He didn't offer details. Just a vague apology wrapped in sincerity. I should have walked away. But the heart doesn't operate on logic. It beats on memory, on longing, on unfinished sentences. I let him stay. And in the quiet that followed, I convinced myself that love sometimes needed space to breathe. Things were different after that. Luca was more attentive, more open. He shared bits of his past, enough to keep me tethered, but never the full story. He spoke of a childhood filled with loss, of cities he left behind, of names he once used but no longer claimed. I listened, trying to piece together the puzzle, hoping that love could make the missing pieces irrelevant. We made plans again. Trips, shared dreams, conversations about the future. But under it all, I sensed a fracture that hadn't fully healed. I started journaling again, something I had stopped during our first months together. It was my way of understanding, of anchoring myself. Pages filled with questions I never dared ask out loud, feelings I wasn't ready to admit, and doubts I couldn't shake. I kept the journal hidden. Under my mattress, behind old sweaters in the closet, places I thought were safe. But nothing is ever truly hidden when someone is looking hard enough. One morning, I woke up to find Luca gone. Again, but this time he didn't take just himself. He took pieces of me. My journal was missing. My thoughts, raw and unfiltered, vanished. I tore the apartment apart, convinced I had misplaced it. But deep down I knew Luca had read my mind in ink, and he had taken it. A week later I received a link in an anonymous email. No subject line. Just a URL, Curiosity Ward with Fear. I clicked it. It led to a blog, a minimalist page with black text on a white background. No author, no dates. But the words, they were mine. Every line, every thought, every confession I had written in that journal now laid bare for strangers. My heartbreaks, my fears, my doubts about Luca, my dreams. All of it, published, shared, violated. The betrayal was surgical, not loud, not messy, precise. Measured, cruel. I stared at the screen for hours, scrolling, reading my own soul like it was a novel written by someone else. The worst part wasn't the invasion. It was the praise. The comments below, applauding the honesty, the vulnerability, the poetic voice of this anonymous author. People moved by my pain, my confusion, my love, never knowing it wasn't fiction, that it was stolen, that it was mine. And Luca, he was nowhere again. Only this time, he hadn't disappeared. He had transformed into someone who used my truth to write his own story. And the world applauded, and that was just the beginning. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. How do you explain that the man you loved had stolen your thoughts and sold them as literature? That the quietest parts of your soul now had strangers dissecting them in the comment section of a blog? I told myself it would go away, that the site would vanish like he had. But it didn't. If anything, it grew. Every day, new posts appeared, all with that same poetic tone, that same familiar cadence I recognized like my own heartbeat. Except they weren't just entries from my journal anymore. Some of them were rewritten memories, conversations we had, dreams I'd confessed in vulnerability. Now twisted, adorned with fictionalized moments that never happened. He was remixing my life into some kind of performance art, and the world was eating it up like gospel. I tried reporting the blog, but there was no contact form, no way to trace who owned the domain. It was hosted on some obscure platform that protected anonymity like a shield. Every attempt at taking it down led to dead ends. I felt like I was screaming into a void, begging for someone to see me and say, "Wes, this was yours first." But all I got was silence. What hurt the most was that the comments weren't wrong. The writing was good, intimate, sharp, beautiful in its edge. My pain, my confusion, even my love had been translated into prose so lyrical, people left paragraphs praising the author for their authentic voice. One user wrote, "I've never felt more understood by a stranger." Another, "This person writes like they've lived through my heart." I wanted to laugh and cry all at once. Of course it felt personal. Those weren't just stories. They were autopsies of my hope. Every time I read a new post, I saw the dissection of a moment I had once thought was only mine. Our late-night talks about music. My anxiety during thunderstorms. The letter I wrote to my father after he died but never sent. Luca had taken it all and repackaged it under the illusion of fiction. And the world called it art. I became obsessed. I stayed up every night refreshing the page, terrified of what he'd publish next. I was chasing my own past like a ghost, unable to stop the haunt. I stopped writing completely. What was the point if every word I penned could be stolen and repurposed? I disconnected from friends, grew distant at work. I stopped answering calls. How could I explain what was happening without sounding like I was unraveling? Even to myself, it sounded delusional. And yet, every word on that blog was a mirror I couldn't escape. I stopped sleeping in my bed, instead curling up on the couch as if changing my location could change the weight pressing on my chest. I checked the blog each morning before I even checked the weather, like an addict reaching for the next hit of self-destruction. And then one post changed everything. It was titled, "She Knew." It wasn't subtle like the others. It wasn't veiled in metaphor or shaded in fictional ambiguity. This one was direct. It described in haunting detail the night I asked Luca about his apartment, my bedroom, the gold light on the ceiling, my exact words, even the trembling in my voice. It didn't stop there. It spoke of her suspicion simmering beneath her soft exterior, of her growing awareness that love sometimes wears a mask and disappears before the reveal. It was a confession without naming names, but anyone who knew me and read it, anyone close enough, would recognize it. And maybe that was the point. He wasn't hiding anymore. This wasn't anonymous. This was personal, targeted, public in the most insidious way. I stared at that post until my eyes blurred, and something inside me broke. I printed the post, highlighted the passages that mirrored my memory, and mailed them to Luca's last known address, even though I knew he no longer lived there. I just needed to do something. I wrote a note. "You don't get to narrate my life like it's your masterpiece." I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. But a few days later, a new post appeared. This one, shorter, one paragraph, titled, "The Writer Always Wins." I threw up after reading it. There was nothing left to interpret. No more illusions. Luca had declared war. A soft, manipulative war where his weapon was language and mine was the slow erosion of sanity. That's when I started keeping receipts, screenshots, dates, side by sides of my original handwritten entries and the blog posts that mirrored them. I knew if I ever had to prove it, I'd need evidence. Proof that these weren't just similar thoughts floating in the ether, but direct theft. I built a folder labeled Arikialaim. I wasn't sure what I would do with it. Go to a lawyer, the police, some online justice forum, but each saved file gave me a sliver of control I had been bleeding out for weeks. Then one night, out of nowhere, I got a text. It wasn't from Luca's number. It was from a random string of digits. But the message was unmistakably him. "I never meant to hurt you, but you have to admit they loved you more when I told the story." And my fingers shook, my throat tightened. And I realized something terrifying. He didn't just think he used my story. He believed he enhanced it. That I was the raw footage and he was the editor. That he had done me a favor by turning my wounds into art. I didn't reply. I deleted the message, but it stayed inside me, curling up like a parasite behind my ribs. I decided then I would fight back, not by begging him to stop, not by going quiet again. I would write my own blog, my own voice, unfiltered, unedited by someone else's perception. I didn't care if anyone read it. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming narrative. I launched the site anonymously, titled it "The Girl He Wrote." My first post was raw, not poetic, just real. I told the truth about Luca, about the stolen words, about how it feels to be both the muse and the casualty. The response was immediate. At first, it was cautious support. Others who had experienced emotional theft created betrayal. Then, something unexpected happened. Someone commented, "Is this about that writer anonymous blog?" Another asked, "Are you the girl he always writes about?" My stomach dropped, but people were connecting the dots. I hadn't mentioned Luca's name or his blog, but readers were piecing it together. One of them posted a side-by-side comparison of his blog's entries and mine. Another created a thread on a writer's forum exposing the similarities. A viral tweet followed. Then a TikTok. Within days, his blog was flooded with backlash. Comments turned from adoration to accusations. "This isn't your story to tell." "Oh, you're not a writer, you're a thief." Then, silence. The blog went offline, gone. All of it. Just a blank page with a message, "Site no longer available." But the damage was done, for him maybe. But for me, I wasn't sure. I expected to feel victorious, relieved. But I didn't. I felt hollow. Like reclaiming something didn't mean it returned whole. That's the thing with violations like these. They don't leave bruises you can show. They bleed inwards. I kept writing. Every day. Not just about Luca, but about the aftermath, the rebuilding. The nights when I still dreamt of him and hated myself for it. The memories that still felt warm even after the betrayal. And the guilt. The guilt of missing someone who broke you. Those entries, those raw, bleeding ones, were the ones people connected with the most. And then one morning, I received an email from a publisher, a woman named Marla, who had followed the unraveling online. She said my writing was powerful, that it deserved a wider audience. She offered to work with me on a collection, one that told Mike's story in my words. I stared at her message for an hour before replying. Something in me whispered that Luca would see it, that he would know I was being offered the same platform he tried to steal, and that this time it was earned. As the project moved forward, I found myself unlearning Luca's version of me, the one who was just poetic when sad, beautiful when broken. I was more than his tragedy, more than his twisted plot device. I wrote about joy again, about healing, about mornings that didn't ache. It was slow. Some days, I still opened the old folder marked RECLAM and cried. Some entries I'll never publish. Some wounds remain personal. But that's the power I'd taken back. The right to choose, to share or not. To rewrite or leave unedited. To own my voice without someone else's shadow hanging over it. But the most unexpected twist came weeks before my book was set to launch. I received another email, this one short, from a name I didn't recognize at first. The subject line, a confession, the body, there's more to the story. If you want to know the truth, meet me at the park bench near the bookstore. Sunday, 3 p.m., no name, no signature. But I recognized the tone, the punctuation, the game. Luca wasn't done, and despite every instinct in my body screaming to ignore him, I knew I'd go. I had to. Not for closure, not for him, but for the final chapter. Because the quiet was loud again, and this time I was ready to listen. I arrived 20 minutes early, pacing near the park bench like a character in someone else's dream, questioning every choice that had led me here. The clouds were low and heavy, casting a silvery light across the pavement, and the air had that thick tension that sits just before a storm. I wore something neutral, something that made me feel neither strong nor exposed. Just present, a shell of calm over a volcano of nerves. For a while no one came. Joggers passed. Children on scooters weaved between benches. A man fed pigeons like they were old friends. And I sat, feeling like the static in a song. Nothing yet, but something about to break. Then, just as my watch struck 3, I saw him. Luca. Or whatever version of him existed now. He looked normal. No dramatic entrance, no cinematic slouch of guilt or triumph. Just a man in a worn jacket, holding a coffee cup like it might warm more than his hands. He didn't sit right away. He stood in front of me, eyes scanning my face like he was unsure if I was real or remembered wrong. I hated how familiar it felt to have him near, how my muscles remembered his presence even when my mind screamed against it. I didn't say a word. Neither did he. We sat in silence for a full minute before he finally exhaled. "I thought you wouldn't come." I said nothing, just stared at him, my fingers gripping the bench so tightly the knuckles whitened. He nodded slowly, as if accepting the weight of my silence. Then, carefully, like setting down something fragile, he spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen the way it did. The blog, the words, it started because I missed you." I almost laughed. Not out of amusement, but disbelief. Of all the things he could have said, "I missed you." That was the excuse. I kept my jaw clenched, still letting him talk. He continued, voice low, words slow, like each one cost him something. After I left the second time, I tried to move on. But I couldn't. I kept replaying everything. Your voice, your laugh, the way you wrote. I found one of your old entries in my bag. I don't even know how it got there. Maybe I grabbed it without thinking. I read it 100 times. It felt like home and punishment at the same time. His hands trembled slightly, and he clutched the cup tighter. I started writing. Not to steal, not at first. Just to feel close to you again. But people liked it. They connected to it. And then the attention came, and I didn't stop. There it was. The rot at the core. Not just betrayal, but betrayal fueled by validation. He didn't steal because he hated me. He stole because the world applauded when he did. I finally spoke, my voice low but sharp. You took what wasn't yours. You carved pieces out of me and fed them to strangers. That's not missing someone. That's using them. He looked down, eyes stinging. I know that now, but I didn't know how to stop. And I hated myself for it. I kept justifying it, telling myself I was honoring you, immortalizing what we had. But I see now I wasn't honoring you. I was silencing you. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask how someone could twist something so sacred into performance. But I didn't. I just sat, letting his words fall like ash around me. Then he said something I didn't expect. That last post, the writer always wins. It wasn't about me. It was about you. You were always the writer. I was just loud. You were honest. I blinked, unsure if I was hearing right. So what now? I asked. You disappear again. He shook his head. No, I'm not here to ask for anything. I needed to give you this. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Not wrapped, just plain cardboard. He set it beside me on the bench. Everything I took, the entries, the drafts, emails to myself, unpublished posts. It's all there. You don't owe me forgiveness, but you deserve the truth. All of it? I didn't touch the box. Not yet. I didn't trust anything that came from him, but something in his voice told me this wasn't a trick. This was surrender. Then he stood, stepped back, and looked at me one last time. I hope your book changes people. I hope your voice is louder than mine ever was. And then he left. No grand exit. Just a man walking away with shoulders heavier than before. I didn't open the box right away. I carried it home like it was something radioactive. I placed it on my desk and stared at it for hours. Then, sometime past midnight, I lifted the lid. Inside were printouts, notebooks, even a flash drive. And something else, a letter, handwritten, no salutation. Just words. You said once that writing was how you made sense of things. I never understood that until I lost you. I tried to write to fill the silence you left, but it only echoed your voice. Every word I wrote was you in disguise. I don't expect redemption, but I do want you to know. I admired you, I envied you, and I never stopped loving you. That doesn't excuse what I did, but it's the only truth I have left. I read it twice, then again, and still I didn't know what to feel. And your sadness. Relief, none of them came cleanly. They tangled, messy, human. I sifted through the contents of the box, page by page, and it hurt. Seeing my words stripped of their context, paraded like fiction. But it also freed something, because I saw, undeniably, that the power had always been mine. Even in theft, it had been my truth that moved people, not Luca's distortion. I began rewriting, not the stolen versions, but the originals, restoring them, framing them with new clarity. I added context, closure, reflection. I turned my past into perspective. Not for him, not for readers, for me. The publisher loved it. Said the second half of the book had evolved into something deeper. Not just a survival story, but a reclaiming. We kept the title, and the girl he wrote, but the subtitle, that changed. Now it read, "And the woman she became." On launch day, I didn't cry. I didn't scan the crowd for Luca. I just stood at the podium, read a passage that had once been stolen and was now mine again, and let the applause wrap around me. Not validation, not victory, just arrival. The book did well. Better than expected. I was invited to panels, interviews, podcasts. People wanted to talk not just about Luca, but about what happens when our stories are taken from us, and how we take them back. I met others, artists, writers, musicians, all with their own versions of Luca in their past. And we talked. We healed. Together. Somewhere along the line, I stopped checking to see if Luca had resurfaced online. Maybe he had. Maybe he hadn't. But his shadow no longer dictated my light. I began teaching creative writing workshops, helping others find their voice, helping them protect it. I watched young writers bloom, raw and unafraid. And I told them, again and again, no one else gets to be the author of your pain. And then one day, months later, a package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single book, a self-published novel. Tittle. And Ashes and Echoes. Author L. Vrenna. I froze. My fingers trembled. I opened the first page. The dedication read, "To the one who taught me silence isn't honesty, and that words, without truth, are just noise." I read the first chapter. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about us. Real fiction. Real fiction. A story that stood on its own legs. Wounded, imperfect, but original. I closed it, placed it on my shelf. I didn't text him, didn't write back, but a strange warmth filled my chest. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just closure. Luca had finally written something of his own. That night, I sat by the window, laptop open, a fresh page waiting, not haunted, not afraid, just ready. I titled the document, The Quiet After, and I began to type, not because I needed to reclaim anything, but because I had something new to say, something entirely mine. I thought healing would feel like a finish line, like the moment you cross into some brighter version of yourself and never look back. But it wasn't like that. It was slower, murkier, like walking through shallow water that sometimes deepened without warning. Even after the book's success, even after Luca's silent surrender in the form of his novel, the echo of it all lingered. Not in loud, crashing ways, but in the quiet spaces of my routine. I'd be making tea, and a phrase from my stolen journal would slip into my mind. I'd walk past a bench and remember the weight of his coffee cup between his hands. I'd wake from dreams that weren't nightmares but also weren't peaceful. Just shadows of conversations that never ended properly. But I didn't run from those moments anymore. I let them arrive. I let them sit. And then I let them go. In the months after the book release, life began to take on a new rhythm. I moved into a different apartment. Nothing extravagant, just something with fresh walls and different light, something untouched by the weight of the past. I painted the bedroom a soft green, bought a new desk, hung prints that made me feel rooted instead of haunted. It wasn't about escaping memories. It was about creating space for new ones. I even adopted a cat, something I'd always wanted but never allowed myself, as if nurturing something small and dependent had once felt like a risk I couldn't take. Her name was Fig. She liked windowsills and silence. And oddly enough, she brought back a part of me I'd forgotten existed, the part that found comfort in quiet without needing to fill it. And then, as things often do, life offered something unexpected. His name was Adrian. We met at a writer's panel I almost didn't attend. I was tired, overbooked, and anxious, but I went because I'd promised I would. I was seated beside him on stage. He was a fiction writer known for his strange, dreamy novels that made you question whether you were awake or remembering someone else's dream. He had a calm presence, almost still in the way he listened, as though the world slowed down when he was trying to understand it. We didn't talk much during the event. But afterward, as people filtered out and the lights dimmed, he approached me. He didn't open with praise or a question about my book. He simply said, "You write like you're remembering something from a different life." I didn't know how to respond. It was the first time in a long time someone saw May and not the girl from the story. We went for coffee, then for walks, then long drives with no destination. Adrian was nothing like Luca. He didn't press, didn't study me like a puzzle to be solved. He let me exist in silence, he asked, but never pushed. He observed, but never assumed. Where Luca had been intensity, Adrian was warmth. Not a wildfire, but a steady flame. It was unfamiliar, this kind of love, or whatever it was forming between us. I didn't fall all at once. I waded in, slowly, hesitantly. Testing the temperature, he never demanded more than I could give, never tried to dig into the scars. And when I finally told him about Luca, about the journal, the blog, the aftermath, he didn't flinch. He just nodded, then said, "Thank you for trusting me with that." No pity, no discount presence. That night, I cried, not because I was sad, but because I realized how long I had been holding my breath. With Adrian, I could finally exhale. But healing isn't just found in new love. Sometimes it shows up in your own reflection. I began teaching regularly, mentoring young writers who carried their own wars in their notebooks. I recognized versions of my younger self in them. Eager, vulnerable, uncertain. I told them what I wished someone had told May, that their voice mattered even if no one applauded, that their pain wasn't currency, and that they never had to bleed on the page to be heard. I watched them bloom, watched them stumble, and I stayed beside them, not to guide but to witness. And in doing so, I began to understand something profound. That survival wasn't just about reclaiming what was taken. It was about building something that no one could take again. One evening, while sorting through old files on my laptop, I came across the folder RECLAM. The one I had built in those frantic days, collecting proof of Luca's theft. I hadn't opened it in months. My hand hovered over the mouse. Then I clicked. The files were all there. Screenshots, comparisons, timelines. Each one a piece of the war I had once fought with everything I had. I scrolled slowly, emotion rising like a tide. But this time it wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was gratitude. Not for what happened, but for what came after. I dragged the folder to the trash. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed it to remember. Weeks later, Adrian and I took a trip, nothing extravagant. A cabin near a lake. No Wi-Fi, no city noise, just us in the trees and the quiet. One morning, I woke early, long before the sun. I wrapped myself in a blanket and stepped out onto the porch. The world was still, the lake smooth as glass. Fig curled up by my feet, and for the first time in years, I felt completely untouched by memory, not in denial of it, not burdened by it, just free. I wrote a short piece that morning. It wasn't about Luca, or pain, or betrayal. It was about a girl on a boat, drifting toward the unknown, smiling not because she had all the answers, but because she was no longer afraid of the questions. And then something curious happened. A message arrived. Not from Luca, not from a stranger, from a journalist. She was working on a piece about ethical storytelling, about how we share stories that aren't entirely our own and the consequences of doing so. She'd come across my book. She wanted to interview me. My first instinct was no. I had already told the story, publicly, in print. But something about her approach was different. She wasn't after drama. She was after nuance, after understanding. I agreed. We met in a quiet cafe. She asked thoughtful questions, listened more than she spoke. And then she surprised me. "Did you know," she said, "that after your book came out, Luca pulled all his previous writings from the internet? Not just the blog. All of it. Even the fiction. He's disappeared from the literary world." I hadn't known, and I wasn't sure how I felt. Relief. A sadness, strange, quiet satisfaction. "But," she continued, "he did one thing before he vanished. He donated money, anonymously but traceable, to a scholarship fund for underrepresented writers. The only name on the transaction was a note for the voices that haven't been stolen yet." I stared at my cup, the steam blurring the edge of the world. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because maybe the story isn't over. Or maybe this is how it ends. With a comma instead of a period." That night, I walked home under a sky so clear it looked like it had been polished. And I realized something. Closure isn't a destination. It's a choice you make again and again, each time the past whispers your name. You choose not to answer. Or you choose to answer differently. When I got home, Adrian was reading. Figs stretched across his lap. The lamp cast golden light across the pages. I watched them for a moment, my heart soft and full. Then I walked to my desk, opened a new document, and wrote the first line of something new. Not a memoir, not a retelling, a story. Entirely fiction, entirely mine. It began with a girl on a train, headed somewhere unfamiliar, carrying nothing but a suitcase of old notebooks and a name she no longer used. And as the wheels hummed against the tracks, she didn't look back, not once. Because she knew, finally, that her story was ahead, not behind. And this time, no one else would write it for her. The story I began that night. About the girl on the train with a suitcase of notebooks and a name she no longer used, was never meant to be read by anyone but me. It was a quiet rebellion, a kind of literary sanctuary where nothing was borrowed, nothing inherited from pain. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't writing to explain, or to heal, or to defend my voice. I was writing because the silence inside me had finally grown fertile, and I wanted to see what would bloom if I planted something there. I told myself it was just for me. No publishers, no readers, no expectations. But truth has a way of betraying even our most guarded intentions. And in every line of fiction I created, there were fingerprints of the girl I used to be, smudged faintly across the dialogue and scenery, not obvious, not confessional, but present like a watermark only I could see. Adrian noticed before I did. One evening, while I read aloud a section I was particularly proud of, a dreamlike sequence in which the protagonist wanders through a train station filled with locked doors, each whispering in a different voice. He looked at me with that half-smile he wore when he understood something before I did. "This isn't just fiction," he said. "It's you, but distilled, like rainwater." I tried to argue, but he shook his head gently. "It's not a bad thing. It's beautiful. You're finally writing with your past instead of about it." I didn't reply, but I carried his words me for days. They sat at the edge of every paragraph I typed, reminding me that maybe, after all, there was still a way to merge who I had been with who I was becoming, without one eclipsing the other. As the story took shape, the protagonist began evolving in ways I hadn't expected. She wasn't just fleeing a former identity, she was reshaping it, folding the old name into her new one like a secret middle name. She made friends, took risks, and eventually she began telling her story to others, not as memoir, but as myth. She transformed her pain into parable, her loss into language. And the more I wrote her, the more I understood that I wasn't escaping my history. I was mythologizing it. stripping it of its power to wound and turning it into something larger, stranger, and more beautiful. Around that same time, I was invited to speak at a literary retreat in the mountains. A small, intimate gathering of writers and artists who believed in vulnerability as craft. Adrian came with me. It was our first real trip together. Something that felt less like escape and more like exhale. The retreat was nestled in a quiet valley, with pine trees that leaned like they were listening, and a lake so still it seemed to dream. The cabins were modest, the kind with creaky floors and mismatched mugs, but there was a fireplace, and shelves of forgotten books, and the kind of stillness that invites words. On the third night, we held a group reading by the fire. Everyone was supposed to share something unfinished, raw. I brought a page from the train story. I didn't plan to. I hadn't even printed it. But when my turn came, and the silence stretched toward me like a hand, I opened my laptop and read the scene, where the girl finally speaks her new name aloud, not as rejection of the past, but as an act of ownership. When I finished, no one clapped. Not out of apathy, but reverence. The kind of hush that means something had landed somewhere deep. And in that hush, I felt something click into place. After the reading, a woman approached me. She was older, with eyes that looked like they'd lived a dozen stories. I recognized her, she said. The girl on the train. I think we've all been her in one form or another. I nodded, unsure what to say. She touched my arm lightly. But most of us never get around to naming ourselves. Thank you for reminding me it's still possible. That night, I lay awake next to Adrian, staring at the wooden ceiling beams and wondering how many pieces of ourselves we leave scattered in the people we never see again. When we returned from the retreat, something shifted in me. A quiet confidence began to bloom. Not the loud, performative kind I used to chase, but something steadier. A trust in my own compass. I finished the novel. I submitted it to my publisher with a note. This one is fiction, but it's also the truest thing I've ever written. They loved it. More than loved it. They called it haunting, elliptical, poetic, and for once, none of those adjectives made me wince. I agreed with them. The book came out under a new title, The Girl Who Named the Wind. It wasn't a sequel. It wasn't a continuation. It was a new tree in the same forest. Critics praised its originality, its subtle emotional architecture. Readers messaged me, saying they saw themselves in the locked doors, in the train's endless motion. Some guessed at the autobiographical elements. Some didn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that my voice had carried again, but this time on its own terms. And then, unexpectedly, Luca resurfaced. Not in my life, but in the literary world. A blogger published a piece titled, "Whatever Happened to the Thief Who Called It Art?" It was a sharp, almost cruel takedown, rehashing the old scandal with venom. They named him, dredged up old posts, called him a parasite. The piece went viral. Comments flooded in, half full of schadenfreude, half filled with outrage. It should have pleased me. It didn't, because healing had changed me. I no longer wanted Luca to suffer. I just wanted him to not matter. I wrote a private journal entry that night. Not for publication, not for processing, just for me. I wrote about how anger ages differently when left unattended. How some wounds don't scar, they disappear, not because they weren't deep, but because they were cleaned with truth. I ended the entry with a simple line. I do not carry him anymore, not even as shadow. And when I closed the journal, I believed it. In the months that followed, Adrian and I grew closer. There were hard days, of course, triggers, echoes, but he never pulled away. He never made me explain the ways in which I was still learning how to be loved without apology. He just stayed. On the anniversary of my book's release, he gave me a framed print. It was a line from The Girl Who Named the Wind, one I hadn't even remembered writing. You are not a story someone else told. You are the language you teach yourself to speak. I cried when I read it. And for the first time, the tears weren't tethered to pain. They were just release. I began working on a third novel, this one stranger, more experimental. No trains, no stolen notebooks. A surreal tale about a woman who wakes up with memories that belong to someone else, and the journey she takes to return them. My agent was confused. "It's weird," she said. "Unmarketable?" I smiled. "Good," I said. "It's not for everyone. Just for those who've ever felt borrowed." I knew it might not sell. I didn't care. It was mine. At a book signing months later, a girl in her 20s approached me. She held the girl he wrote it in trembling hands. "It saved me," she whispered. I was in something like that. Not as public, not as poetic, but just as real. I held her hand and said, "Then, I'm glad you found your way out." She nodded. "I'm trying. I write now. Little things, they help." I looked her in the eye and said, "That's how it starts. Little things. And then one day, they're not little anymore. They're you." That night, as Adrian and I walked home beneath a sky smeared with stardust, I realized something that stopped me in my tracks. I had become the person I used to write toward. The woman I had dreamed of being when I was still broken and small and lost in someone else's story. I had arrived, not at a finish line, but at a new beginning. And somewhere in a quiet room, I imagined Luca reading my latest book. Not out of obsession, not out of malice, but maybe, just maybe, out of understanding. Maybe he would see that the girl he wrote was never his to begin with. She had simply passed through his life on her way to something greater. And now, she was no longer a chapter. She was the author, and she was just getting started. I used to think stories had to end with resolution. That for something to be finished, it had to be tied with a ribbon, explained, and packaged neatly for someone else to understand. But as I sat one late afternoon by the window of the bookstore cafe, where I now spent most of my time, watching the golden spill of light across the spines of untouched novels, I realized the most honest endings don't look like conclusions at all. They look like quiet continuations, like the moment just before a sentence finds its next breath. Life didn't stop when the story was told. It simply grew around it. By then, the third novel had gone to print. It wasn't expected to make waves. It was strange, non-linear, filled with blurred identities and surreal motifs. My publisher approached it cautiously. "It's a risk," they warned. But I welcomed the risk. It felt right. I had already written the story people expected from me. This one was for the fragments of me I had once silenced. It was a book born not of recovery, but of arrival. A reclamation not of the past, but of imagination. Reviews trickled in, some puzzled, some adoring, many calling it challenging or enigmatic. I didn't mind. The only opinion that lingered in my thoughts was my own. And it whispered, "Finally, you've built something no one can take." A life, with Adrian settled into something soft and grounding. We didn't live together yet. We weren't in a rush. That was the beauty of it. We gave each other space to remain whole, even as we leaned. On weekends, we visited local art exhibits or took long walks through the botanical gardens just outside the city. We talked about things that didn't hurt. That was a milestone in itself. To share silence and know it wasn't tension. To share space and not shrink. He taught me how to cook one proper dish, tagliatelle with sage and lemon, and I made it for him when he had long days and forgot to eat. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't worship my trauma or quote my past back to me in awe. He simply loved the woman I had become, not for what I'd survived, but for how I now lived. But the past, as it does, found a final way to surface. It happened on a Thursday. Of course, Thursdays had always followed me. A package arrived at my door. No return address. No signature. Just a thin envelope inside. I knew immediately. Not because I recognized the handwriting, it was typed, but because there was a weight to it that felt familiar, like the pulse of an old scar. I hesitated before opening it. A small part of me feared it was another violation, another uninvited chapter, but curiosity won. And beneath the crisp fold was a letter. From Luca. It was short, measured. The tone wasn't apologetic. It wasn't self-pitying. It was something rarer, accountability. "I once told myself I wrote about you because I loved you. But the truth is, I wrote about you because I couldn't become you." You had the voice. I had the echo. I understand now. This isn't an apology. I gave that to the world and called it fiction. This is a goodbye. Not because I was ever entitled to a final word, but because you never needed one from me. You were the story. I was just the footnote that mistook itself for a chapter. Keep writing. Not for them, for you. I reread the letter 3 times. Not because it moved me, but because it didn't. And that surprised me. It felt distant, like an echo in a language I no longer spoke. I folded it carefully, not out of sentiment, but respect. Then I placed it in a drawer and left it there, like a pressed leaf from a forest I had long since left behind. That night, I sat with Adrian by the window, a quiet song playing in the background. I told him about the letter. He didn't ask to read it. He simply asked, "Are you okay?" And I nodded. There was no tremble in my voice, no storm in my chest, just clarity, a clean pause. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a university. A course on modern memoir had assigned my first book. It felt surreal to know that my unraveling was now part of someone's syllabus. I stood before a room of young faces, unsure what they expected me to say. They asked about Luca, of course, about the theft, about the fame. But one student asked something different. A girl with red braids and a cracked phone case raised her hand and asked, "When did you know you were free?" I paused. The room held its breath. Then I said, "When I stopped writing to prove I existed." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The kind of silence that feels like a shared secret. I left the classroom lighter than I had entered. As I walked across the campus lawn, the wind picked up and tugged at my coat. I laughed out loud, because something about that moment reminded me of the girl I used to be. The one sitting in her apartment, heartbroken and lost, trying to stitch herself together with ink and hope. She wouldn't have believed this version of her existed, but she would have kept writing just to find out. That summer, I began something new, a writing residency in a coastal town where the days smelled of salt and the nights hummed with cicadas. I was given a cabin, a key, and no expectations, just space. Glorious, uninterrupted space. I brought only the basics: a few clothes, my laptop, a stack of unread books, and Fig, who had grown into a graceful shadow with a mind of her own. I didn't bring any of my old manuscripts. No reminders, no trophies. I wasn't there to relive what I'd done. I was there to see what was next. At first, I didn't write at all. I walked, I read, I watched the sky change moods, and somewhere in that stillness, a new story began to whisper. Not another novel. Not yet. This one wasn't for anyone but me. It was a letter of sorts, to the girl I used to be. I wrote it in the second person, as if I were speaking to her across time. You won't always be afraid. One day, you'll wake up and the silence won't feel like abandonment. It'll feel like peace. One day, you'll stop measuring your worth in how many people understand you. You'll write things no one else gets, and you'll love them anyway. You'll stop flinching at the sound of your own name. You'll fall in love, not because you're trying to forget, but because you've remembered how. You'll laugh during storms. You'll keep the door open. You'll become everything he couldn't imagine you being. And more. I saved the letter in a folder titled, "Not Everything Has to Be Shared." And I meant it. Some stories are sacred, not because they're too painful, but because they're too whole. The residency ended. Life resumed. Adrian and I eventually moved in together, not because it completed us, but because it made everything simpler. He turned the second bedroom into a music room. I turned the attic into a writing studio. We kept separate spaces. We kept growing. Years passed. One afternoon, while unpacking a box we'd forgotten in storage, I found that old journal. The one Luca had stolen from. The one that had started it all. I held it like an artifact. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded in places, but the words were untouched. I flipped through slowly, marveling at the rawness, the vulnerability. And then I reached the last page. It was blank. I had never finished it. I had closed that chapter in chaos, in pain. And now, all these years later, I picked up a pen and wrote one sentence. I am not your ending. I am my own beginning. Then I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf. Not hidden, not displayed. Just there. A part of the journey, but no longer the destination. And as I stood in that sunlit room, surrounded by boxes, memories, and silence that didn't age, I understood something fully for the first time. The story was never about Luca. It wasn't even about what he took. It was about what I built afterward. About the voice I reclaimed, the love I allowed, the woman I became. And in the end, that's the only story that matters. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.